welcome to Chinatown and welcome to Chinese Culture Center of San Francisco. Thank you all for coming to such a special book talk and pop-up event featuring the book that we all love, Everything I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant by Curtis Chin. Happy APA Heritage Month and also happy the Pride Month Eve. My name is Jun. I'm the Programs Associate at Chinese Culture Center of San Francisco. Let me give you a brief introduction about CCC. Since founded in 1965, CCC has been a beacon of art and culture in our city. Over the years, CCC has uplifted Chinatown through arts as both a vibrant neighborhood and a strong metaphor for the immigrant experiences. Our Visual Arts Center, I think many of you checked out the exhibition inside the Visual Arts Center, right? Located right next door on the same floor in 41 Rose Gallery, where the free book giveaway with this amazing list of queer adult fiction and non-fiction happening soon, are our experimental art platforms that give voices to underexplored and underserved API and BIPOC artists and support their community-based practices. Next year, we will be celebrating our 60th, not 16th, but 60th anniversary.
Woo!
Thank you. And that's not the only thing that we celebrate this year. This year, it is the 20th anniversary of our longtime partner, APA Heritage Foundation. And this event is part of the 20 headlining events as part of the celebration. Congratulations, Claudine Chang. And I'm honored to invite and welcome Claudine to the stage to give us a few words.
Hello everyone. So the month of May is celebrated as Asian American and Pacific Islanders Heritage Month in this country. So this is actually the 45th such a celebration in the country and the 20th in our city. So we are looking at having 20 headlines events, and we are so happy to support that the Chinese Cultural Center event headlining Curtis Chin. The API Heritage Month is about celebrating our history, our culture, about storytelling, and about really learning what happened in the past, where we are, where we are going. So I'm very excited. I actually, because of Curtis Chin's book, I actually looked up a little bit about what it is about. And it's I think Curtis' history and Curtis' memoir. Is it a memoir? It's a memoir. It's really like the history of our community in the country. I mean, from running a restaurant to founding your own nonprofit, the Asian American Writers Workshop in New York, and from there to being a celebrated writer, author, and also a documentary producer. It's amazing. I think Curtis has an amazing history, and I really want to learn from you what I can learn from Chinese restaurants. I mean, I don't know if all of you, please get a copy of the book, read it. I think it is a movie script in the making. So, I think it is. So, but Curtis also most recently completed a documentary on Cocky Lee, so we really look forward to more of your work. So I'm very happy to welcome you to San Francisco.
Thank you so much, Claudine, for your beautiful remarks. Along with the partners such as APA Heritage Foundation, this event wouldn't have been possible without the invaluable support of our partners and supporters. First and foremost, heartfelt thanks to the San Francisco Public Library, our main, yes, thank you. The main partner for this event, and thank you so much for your generous contribution towards the book giveaway. Yay! Thank you. Also, we would like to extend our gratitude to our supporters, Tatuena Lee, Cynthia Thompson, Wei Ling Wing, Portsmouth Square Plaza Parking Corporation, and Angel Island Immigration Foundation, Angel Island Immigration Station Foundation, and yes, I got it right this time. Thank Thank you. And to all our members, CCC contemporaries, for your support. You really made this event happen. Thank you so much. And yes, thank you. And also, I would like to ask all of you to support CCC and many more amazing public programs like this by participating in our Give in May campaign and joining as a member today. Okay, today, let me talk a little bit about the main event. Today, we will have Curtis to share with us his insights and experiences based on his memoir. Against the backdrop of his family's popular Chinese restaurant, not any Chinese restaurant, but the Chinese restaurant in Detroit, engaging in a dialogue with CCC's curator, Hoi Long. Hoi Long is Hong Kong-born, San Francisco-based curator with a deep sensitivity to neighborhood dynamics in her curatorial approach. As CCC's curator since 2018, she has been overseeing the center's exhibitions, public art interventions, and multi-year community-based projects. In 2020, she was named as a game-changing curator by SF Arts Monthly. Yay! So proud of you, Ho. In 2022, she launched an inaugural Artist-in-Residence program at 41 Rose Alley in Chinatown. So it is safe to say that she attributes everything she learns about curation to SF Chinatown. And last but not least, the star of the event, as renowned writer, activist, and filmmaker, Curtis Chin is a co-founder of the Asian American Writers Workshop in New York City and served as the nonprofit's first executive director. He went on to write for network and cable television before transitioning to social justice documentaries, as Claudine mentioned, including Vincent Hu, Tested, and his recent film and photographer Corky Lee, Dear Corky. His films have been screened at over 600 venues in 20 countries. He has written for CNN, Bon Appetit, the Detroit Free Press, and the Boston Globe's Emancipator. As graduate of the University of Michigan, anyone alumni? Oh yes. He has received awards from ABC Disney Television, New York Foundation for the Arts, and National Endowment for the Arts, and many more. His essay in Bon Appetit was selected as the best food writing in America 2023. Without further ado, let's welcome Curtis and Howard to the stage.
Hello everyone, and thank you, June, for setting the stage for us and literally setting the stage as well. So thank you to the CCC team and staff for really building up such a wonderful environment for us to learn a lot from Curtis today. Hello, Curtis.
Hi.
Shall we do some audience polling first? Okay, so raise your hand if you grew up in a Chinese restaurant, have experience going up in a Chinese restaurant. Oh, no. Okay. There might be therapists here.
Hey.
Just kidding. Okay. How many of you have grew up in Chinatown or spent some childhood in Chinatown? Oh. Okay, welcome back, everyone. And how many of you is a closeted gay man? Okay.
You should actually ask how many people grew up as a Republican.
Oh.
That's also in the book.
It's gonna be one of those like. So Curtis, why don't you kick us off? Welcome us to Charles.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you for the warm reception, and thank you everybody for coming out here. Growing up as an Asian American in the Midwest, we always thought of Chinatown or San Francisco as like Daifao or like the motherland, and so my heart's always warm just coming out here and seeing San Francisco. It's like, wow, how would my life have been different if I actually grew up here in San Francisco? So thank you for the warm welcome. As June mentioned, I grew up in a Chinese restaurant, in Detroit, and it wasn't just any Chinese restaurant, but it was the Chinese restaurant. And the way I sort of gauge that is I like to ask people, guess how many egg rolls you think we sold in the 65 years that we own this business? And if you read the book, you can't guess. Okay, any guesses? 100,000? 500,000? Where's the accounting department at Visa? Are they here? Any other guesses? 5 million? We actually sold over 10 million egg rolls. These are really good egg rolls that my grandmother and my mom and my aunties made. And like the skin was, homemade, the sauce was homemade, everything. So they're really, really popular. So growing up, in this place was wonderful, despite the fact that Detroit at the time was struggling. Not only did you have the auto industry that was going downhill, but you had crack cocaine, you had AIDS. I knew 5 people murdered by the time I was 18 years old. But, my parents had this wonderful Chinese restaurant in the inner city where they were able to raise me and my 5 siblings, including my sister who's hanging out back there, and they were able to teach us all these values to get on with our lives. And so for me, writing this book isn't just about retracing my own journey and all the trouble that I got into as a kid, but it's also a thank you to my parents for, providing me and my siblings with these wonderful lives. And it's also a hat tip to Detroit, because I think that people still misunderstand the city, but I wanted to show that Detroit was still capable of producing good things, like me. So, to start us off today, I'm going to read a little bit just off the prologue. The book is structured into 3 sections of 8 stories each. 8 stories in elementary, middle school, 8 in high school, and 8 in college, and it's 888 because it's lucky to Chinese people. But the prologue actually is focused on my family and our journey to America. And there's 2 reasons why I wanted to start off the book this way. First is that when you read about stories, the Asian American experience or the Chinese American experience, oftentimes it's centered on the West Coast or maybe New York City. You don't really think of Asians being in the center of our country as early as the 1800s, but that's where my family was. And so I wanted to honor that history. The second reason is that I don't think you can know a person's journey unless you know their family's history. Because, that's where you get your values from and your dreams and your hopes, and that's why I wanted to start off this way. So that's how we'll start off today's presentation. I'll read the first page from the prologue. So, everything I learned in a Chinese restaurant. Welcome to Chung's. Is this for here to go? Armed with a smile and a red waiter's jacket with a perpetual plum sauce stain. That's how my dad greeted any new face who entered the lobby of our popular Chinese restaurant in Detroit. Interestingly, my great-great-grandpa, Gong Li Chin, had faced the same question in the late 1800s as he stood cold and alone on a rickety dock in Guangzhou, China, trying to decide his future and that of his young impoverished family. For here to go. For here to go, as I got older, it was a question I asked myself. Starting in our restaurant's long and open back kitchen, where my family made some of our most popular items, including the tangiest barbecue pork and best-smelling almond cookies, my mom taught me my first lessons. Before diving into math, English, and geography, she began with a little American history, tales of elders and ancestors, our family as prologue. And so the prologue continues, talking about my family's journey. My great-great-grandfather, Gong Li Chin, moved from Canton, China to Canton, Ohio, before realizing there weren't actually Chinese people there. And then moving up to Detroit. And at that time, Detroit was just starting the auto industry. He tried to get a job working in one of the factories, but there was a lot of discrimination against the Chinese back then, and he got one of the few opportunities, doing one of the few opportunities that was available to those early Chinese immigrants, which was the laundries. And so he worked in the hand laundry. Luckily, he saved up enough money because at some point the United States enacted this thing called the Chinese Exclusion Act. And because he had saved up enough money to open up his own laundry, which is one of the few exceptions, right? You could either be a student or a merchant. Because he was able to bring over his own son, my family was able to build a life here, right? And so his son opened up a grocery store in the 20s, and then in 1940, they opened this wonderful restaurant called Chung's Cantonese Cuisine. And it was popular right off the bat. I mean, rich, poor, black, white, Christian, Jewish, we took anybody's money. It's just a really popular restaurant. And so the prologue continues all the way to the 60s. At that time, the country was going through a lot of racial strife. Cities were burning down. Detroit got hit particularly hard. The National Guard had to be called in because people were being killed. And for the first time ever, my parents actually had to close the restaurant for 5 straight days. But during those 5 days, my parents also found time to have sex. And so, 9 months later, I was born as the riot baby. And so, people always ask me, why do you talk about social justice so much, right? And I'm like, well, without that incident, I probably wouldn't be around. So I kind of have to do this. That's the book, and it really follows that fundamental question. Is this for here to go? And it's a question that I struggled as a young person. I think that all of us at some point, ask that question. I love my family, I love the place that I'm at, but maybe there's something better for me, right? Maybe there's something else out there. And so that's it. The book came out in October 17th. I've been on this massive tour. I've gone to over 200 places, including 5 in Europe, to talk about the book. And I'm glad to say that it's actually already in its 3rd printing.
Wow.
So thank you so much everybody for coming out. And I look forward to a really fun conversation today.
Thank you for the introduction, Curtis. So I'm not a riot baby, I'm just an outright boredom baby. So, just a riot. So you're claiming that everything you learn inside a Chinese restaurant, right? And it really comes from both from your family and both with the customers that come in, from regular folks to drag queens to the mayor of Detroit. I would love for you to share, some fun stories about your customers and what did you learn from them?
Well, I would say that regular folks are drag queens sometimes, right? Sometimes people ask me, given the title of their book, what is the most important lesson that you learned, or the first lesson? And it has to do with our customers. When you're a little kid, oftentimes your parents say, don't talk to strangers. My parents actually gave me me and my siblings, the exact opposite advice. They said, talk to strangers. And who they were talking about were the people sitting in our dining room. Because my mom, sadly, did not have a chance to even finish high school, right? And my dad went to community college for a couple of semesters before he had to quit to work in the family business. So they didn't necessarily know what kind of opportunities existed for us outside of the 4 walls of that restaurant, but they knew they had this dining room full of people who did. And so anytime my dad met somebody who was interesting or just seemed like they had a, good job, he'd call all 6 of us kids to run over and barrage them with questions of what do you do for a living? How did you get your job? How much money do you make? And so from that, I just learned how to talk to people that were different from me, which I think is a very important skill set to have. But more importantly, not to be afraid of asking questions when you don't know something, and not being afraid to ask for help. And so that is something that I feel like was a gift that I learned very early on working in that dining room. And it's allowed me to also have the life that I've had. Because I travel around, I've been to probably 800 or 900 places now at this point, giving talks about whether my book or my films. But, wherever I go, I feel comfortable, right? Meeting people who are different. And so I thank my parents for that every day of, teaching me that skill set, so.
Yeah, and when I was reading the book, I really wish you just walked up to someone and asked, how do I find love? How do I find a boyfriend? with one of your customers. And I feel like one of the lingering, themes and mantra that you keep repeating to yourself is don't be gay. Don't be gay. And I feel like if there is we can spill it, into an AI, and it'll probably be it gets mentioned every so often. So as you're reading the book, you really feel that some of those messages are really drilling down on you internally as a person. And also one of the most, remarkable figure in the book is your mother. So I would love to hear you talk more about her, and you have written her into the book in such a, nuanced and endearing way. And I think as someone with an Asian mom, right, who always teeters between kind of care and control, it's actually really tough to navigate as a kid. So please share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I love my mom. She's really, I guess would say probably the most dominant figure in my life in some ways, right? And she did have a tough life. She does have a tough life. She's, she was born in China. She was left behind by her parents as they left. Maybe I should just read the story about my mom that I wrote. And she's the one that really encouraged me in many ways to be a writer. So I would love to read this story. So again, the book is structured into 3 different sections. And this story that I'm going to read is from the college years. But to sort of set this up, so my mom had an arranged marriage, right? She was 17 years old. She was set up to marry my dad. This guy from Detroit who she'd never met before. The only thing she knew about Detroit was that it made great cars and even better music. She had very little understanding. But she did what her parents wanted her to do. So she came to this country. She didn't get a chance to graduate high school. And she didn't necessarily like that restaurant life, you know, because it was really hard, the long hours, and she didn't want that for us. And so she really had this mantra that she always repeated to us, which was work hard, obey your elders, and be quiet, right? You guys probably all have experienced that to some, you know, variation or whatever. But she just kept saying that to us over and over, like work hard, work hard. And so, you know, at that time, it was the 80s, and being gay was really hard because there was AIDS, right? And anytime you read anything about a gay person in the paper, it was that they were in the hospital and dying, and that they probably had been just disowned by their family. So that didn't seem like a very optimistic future. Plus, by that time, you know, one of our favorite customers had been murdered, you know, my senior year. And so I just didn't think that I had a very optimistic outlook of life, really. I thought I'd be dead by the age of 30. I think a lot of gay men around that time period also felt that way. We didn't think we had a long life. And so I didn't understand the point of being in college, right? Spending 4 more years in a classroom when I thought, well, I'll probably be gone by the end of the decade. And so I had to weigh that against my mom's hopes and desires, because I knew she had sacrificed so much for me and my siblings. And so I rationalized, what would be giving up 4 years of my life for a woman who's given up her whole life for me? And so I made a deal with my mom. I said, okay, I'll apply to college, but I'm only applying to one school, and if I don't get in, I'm not going. So pick wisely. And so she, without a doubt, she said, you're applying to Michigan. Okay, so fine. I applied to Michigan, and sadly I got in. So I ended up going to college. I was one of those kids that actually, you know, worked full time, and I took night classes. I didn't know what I was going to do, but when you look at the course catalog, there are a lot of night classes that are creative writing classes. And so I did the math, and I said, okay, if I studied poetry writing, and if I only wrote haikus, I could graduate in fewer than 500 words. And so that was my whole goal in life. That was my quickest way to get out of Michigan. And so I guess I wrote a pretty mean haiku, because I got into the creative writing program there, which only took 20 undergraduates. And so this story picks up from getting into that. And again, this is the 80s, the late 80s, almost into the 90s. Let me find out. Oh, one thing is that so you're supposed to read the book like a journey into a Chinese restaurant. So that's why the opening line is like, my dad's welcome to Chung's, and the final scene is sort of like, please come again. But all the chapter titles are listed like a Chinese menu. So this is chapter M7. Being a creative writing major made me the literary expert at Chung's. That was inevitable, as my dad asked every customer, have you met our number 3? He's the writer in the family. Every time he mentioned my program, the number of students accepted got smaller and smaller. At some point, I expect him to say I was the only one on campus even allowed to own a pen. One week, one of our waiters was out sick. My younger siblings were busy with their weekend activities, so I was the one called in to help. I jumped at the chance to have some home-cooked meals for a few days. I was running around the dining room, refreshing our customers' silver teapots, when a white middle-aged woman reached into her oversized bag and pulled out a colorful hardcover. Have you read this book? It's so good. The Joy Luck Club, the recently released novel that featured a bunch of old, sassy Chinese ladies who like to eat, gossip, and play mahjong, could have easily been set in our back kitchen. Every time I came in to help at the restaurant, another diner, usually older and female, cited the most memorable characters, lines, and scenes. They all wanted to know if I was working on something similar. I was writing poetry, but they didn't care. To them, all writers were the same. They would squeal, you could be the next Amy Tan. My mom turned out to be the biggest pusher. She rarely had a book in her hand, but the success of the Joy Luck Club convinced her that her life was a bestseller too. She followed me around the dining room, dropping stories from her childhood, the same ones I'd heard growing up, but now she recounted them as if she was auditioning for her own books on tape. One night, after seeing how the waiters sometimes pooled their tips together, my mom shared an oldie. When the communists marched south, they targeted my family. My uncles and grandpa were rich in America, so the Red Guard called us traitors. My stubborn grandma didn't want to leave her big home, so when my parents escaped to Hong Kong, they left me behind to keep her company. The communists hated me and my pawpaw. When I was 4, they made me watch as they forced my grandma to climb the old banyan tree in our courtyard. Then they pushed her off into a pile of broken glass. For a visual, my mom rubbed her knees. Another time, standing at the water station, she launched into her own nautical tale. When I was 5, my uncle in America paid $25,000 in renminbi, a king's ransom in people's money, to local fishermen to ferry our remaining family out of China. After a long ride tucked under the planks of his fishy fishing boat, we came up for air. But we weren't in Hong Kong. The trader had turned us into the authorities. In jail, I had to sing Communist Party songs to earn extra rice for me and my grandma. Another chapter came as we stood beneath a painting of the Chinese countryside. When my pawpaw and I were freed from jail, we found that the officials had given away our home to peasants. We were forced to live several villages away in a dirt hut with 3 other families. Whenever we went out for a pail of water, my grandma had to bend low to keep her head below the soldiers. Once again, she gave me a demonstration, this time bowing her head. Granted, my mom's epic saga interested me. Who wouldn't be intrigued by tales of prison cells, guns, and stolen ransoms? Even the parts about her mundane life in Hong Kong after she was reunited with her parents and siblings were amusing. But these were her stories, not mine. She had to tell them, not me. I was in school to find my own voice. I sat and listened, but that was as far as it would go. Toward the end of the summer, as I was at the back table sipping my red pop, stockpiling poems for my upcoming semester, my mom sat down. Before I could say anything, she started talking. I was the top student in Hong Kong. When Pepsi came to town, they held a big contest for students to draw a picture of their own school. Mine was the best at Sacred Heart. I won 6 cases. There were so many bottles, I had to give some to the nuns. I threw down my Parker pen, the one I treated myself to after getting into the program. Yes, and they kept burping all day. It was so funny. You told me that story over and over, and I don't even like Pepsi. I prefer Coke. My mom's shoulders shriveled. The shine faded from her rosy cheeks. You don't want to hear my story? I tensed up. I do, but I'm behind on my own stuff. Between working at Drake's, the Journal, and Saving the World, my schedule was packed. On top of that, my workshops in the fall were advanced. Still, insecure about my place in the program, I put pressure on myself to create more interesting writing by staying up late and scribbling in my notebook every detail of my life. But no matter how hard I tried, working harder could not produce a better poem. My mom lifted herself off her seat. The glint in her eyes orphaned me. Her 42 years of life flashed before my eyes. She'd gone from Guangzhou to Hong Kong to Detroit and spent the past 2 decades raising her 6 children in a hostile foreign land. She tried to prove that her life had worth, that it hadn't gone unnoticed, and here I was, the ungrateful son, writing it off. Her lips quivered in a soft murmur. I hastily picked up my pen, backtracking. Go ahead, Mom, I'll write it down this time. My mom bowed her head as if I were one of the soldiers holding a gun to her temple, ordering her to sing. No, you go on. You do your own thing. I reached out my hand, but by then she'd disappeared through the black swinging door, leaving only the rattling from the kitchen, the clanging woks and rumbling dishwasher. I sat there upset at myself for being so inconsiderate. Everything I'd done in the past 3 years had been for her, but it seemed as though I had failed the final test. My education wasn't just to help me get a better life, it was for my whole family. We were a team. We were the 8 immortals. How could I let them down? I needed to make things right, but I knew that, like most disappointments in our house, apologies were never spoken. Only deeds would bring about reconciliation. So.
Thank you for this. And later on in the book, your mom contributed to one of my favorite moments in the work, which is her reaction to the Reagan administration's inaction to the AIDS epidemic. So there's a lot of wonderful surprises and also very empowered moment that is spoken through your mother. And I think, even with you handling your mother's story in this passage here, it's really hard and deep material. And, and in the book, something I really applaud you doing is keeping a lighthearted and I think humorous tone throughout. So my next question is really a question of how you find your voice in this book. And I am going to reference one moment in the book itself where Curtis was kind of early in the creative writing creative writing journey in his life, and an instructor, basically a pretty racist one, just told him, like, you sold the story, you did not write it. That is not your voice. There's something along those lines. So when you were developing this book, how did you overcome it? Did you ever overcome it? How did you navigate that?
Yeah, so growing up at a very young age, I didn't think I was going to be a writer. I had no concept of what writing was about. I like to say that I grew up in a Chinese restaurant. The only book we had was the phone book. Right? I didn't read, or we had two other books. We had the Harlequin romances that were left behind by the single women that ate at our restaurant. Then we had the Bible, which I think people left behind on purpose because they're Buddhist. I had zero interest in reading anything, so I didn't read. It actually wasn't until I was 14 years old where the idea of being a writer switched from being a waiter to writer. I thought I was going to be a waiter, now I'm a writer. And it was the Vincent Chin case, actually. Does everybody here know what the Vincent Chin case is? If there's anybody here who doesn't, I'll repeat it, because I think it's important for people to know what the story is. Okay, so in the 80s, Detroit was struggling, the auto industry. It's a one-industry town. And Vincent was a Chinese American. Oh, I should also say, because the auto industry was struggling, that led to a lot of anti-Japanese sentiment, which led to a lot of anti-Asian sentiment. Vincent was a Chinese American out celebrating his upcoming wedding. At some point, these two white guys come in, and they're overheard saying, "It's because of you mother blanks that we're out of work." They're all thrown out of the bar, but these two guys get in their car and they drive around the streets of Detroit until they see Vincent sitting outside of a car, outside of McDonald's. They take a baseball bat from their car and they bash his head in, right? And our families were friends. My uncle was his best man. And so we found out about the next morning that he's struggling for his life in the hospital. And when you're a 14-year-old kid and you know somebody that's, in that condition, you're going to check the newspaper, right, to find out, well, how are they reporting on it? I checked the radio, I checked, TV. We didn't have internet back then, so I checked everything I could. Nothing. I checked the next day, nothing. Next day, nothing. Nothing, nothing, nothing. It took them 12 days before they covered that story. But in the interim, all the people from the Chinatown community were coming into our restaurant asking us, what happened? What did we know? I mean, people always came to our restaurant anyways because we had the gambling den underneath our basement, so we were that. But, that disparity between what our community cared about and what the mainstream media cared about really stood out to me. And when the judge, several months later, came back with a sentence that these two killers would not have to serve a single day in jail, and they were only fined $3,000 because you don't put these type of people in jail, it really made me feel that, I don't mind that he had compassion for these killers. I think it's important for us always to have compassion for everybody else, but the fact that he had no compassion for Vincent Chin and Vincent Chin's fiance, his family, I think that's the problem. He should never have let the compassion that he had for these people outweigh that. And I felt like, to me, it's because he didn't know our community. He didn't see us as people. He didn't think of us as people worthy of equality. And so that's when I understood the importance of telling our story. And so as a 14-year-old kid, what I did was I lugged the typewriter from our back kitchen to our dining room. Do you guys know what typewriters are? Okay. So I started writing these letters to the editor saying, hey, what about this? And, I'm 14 years old, and so, none of them ever got published, but it just really set me on this path in my life of always making sure that our story are told, so I feel like writing this book is part of that too, part of that journey for me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And I think, as someone who has gone through, Asian American study is really studying the Vincent Chin case that has led to a lot of people's awakening to the realities of what it means to be Asian in America, what it means to be perceived as Asian in America, and to be able to read about that through your perspective, and and hearing that you picked up a typewriter after that, and that was a spur of I need to find my own voice and I need to express myself. I think it's very moving.
It's a heavy typewriter too. Those things are big back then.
Yeah, the way I imagined it when I read that part was just like that.
No, they were big.
Yeah, so I think my next question, and I want to get to know you a little bit more as an artist too, and it's actually inspired by the Dear Corky documentary, which is now on PBS, and you can view it for free online, so congratulations on that. So in there, Corky, who's a community movement photographer in New York City who had unfortunately passed away due to COVID. Something he mentions in the film and something he carries with him is that if I care about money, I wouldn't be doing this, right? If someone were to not care about the financial side of things, then they might be more quirkily. And of course, you're now navigating this world between community, creativity, and also commercial success. I want to ask you, how's the book tour going? How's the book doing? And how are you kind of balancing, the publishing world?
For people who don't know Corky Lee, he was a wonderful human being, in addition to being a committed community activist. I was fortunate enough to have footage of him that I was going to use for a different film, and when he passed away from COVID, I basically was able to take that footage to create this 17-minute doc that is available for free online. So if you go to pbs.com, look up American Masters, that's a program that it's on. And it really tells his journey. And for the people who are artists in the room, it really talks about the struggle of being a community artist, right? Community activist artist, right? Because it is a balancing act of how do you pay the bills? How, at the same time, you're very committed to the work that you're doing and your community. So please, look him up. I mean, he's a really wonderful person, and I want to help keep his legacy alive. And yeah, one of the things he does talk about is just the reality of being a working artist, particularly with the internet, when things are online for free, whether they're pictures, whether they're videos, whether they're stories. People just have this assumption that if it's on the internet, it's free, right? And as someone who has worked in Hollywood, and now I'm with what's called the Big Five and publishing their 5 big companies, I try to straddle that between doing community projects, which give back, but then also, working with larger corporations because, frankly, they have more money, and so I always try to give back, and I always try to make sure that, hopefully the things that I'm doing are also opening doors for other Asian Americans to sort of have opportunities. When I sold my book, I got a good amount of money for the book, but I had read this article about black British writers, how after George Floyd had been murdered, a lot of black British writers were able to sell their books. But because the publishing industry there didn't know how to support those books, they didn't know how to market and promote it, those books all underperformed. And because of that, it's actually been more difficult for black British writers to sell books. I didn't want Asian Americans to be in that same position too, so I felt like as someone who did get a big advance from these companies, I had to doubly make sure that my book didn't fail, right? Because the reality is that these large corporations, they don't know how to reach our community. They wouldn't know to come to a place like CCC, to promote the book. They're just going to do a general blanket. It's what they call spray and pray. And that doesn't service communities who don't have a history of even expecting books to speak to their experience, right? I grew up as an Asian American in a time where I would have never thought to look for an Asian American book because nobody published that kind of stuff, right? And I think to some large degree, many in our community still feel that way. We don't know to even look for stories from our own community, right? Because we weren't trained in that way. And so because of that, and because of my commitment to the community, I wanted to make sure that I reached out to my community to promote the book. And that's why I've gone to like over 200 places, giving these book talks, and it's been wonderful to sort of see that and to have people come up to me who say, I don't usually read a book, but I read this book and I read it in 2 days. Do you know what I mean? Because I think that's the beauty of literature and making people feel seen, right? And who knows, maybe now they'll pick up another book, or they'll know that, there is literature being produced out there for them. And so that's why I've been living out of my suitcase for the last year. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Curtis. And I think we're pretty much down to our final question. And as an artist, you're really practicing, and you're always looking for the next thing, or doing and working. And so what is coming up for you? I'd love for you to share.
Thanks. Oh my God, I feel so blessed. I mean, this book has opened up so many opportunities for me. It's kind of funny because in the book, I'm like the worst cook in the family, but suddenly now I'm like this food expert. So as mentioned earlier, I wrote a piece for Bon Appetit that got selected for Best American Food Writing. America's Test Kitchen asked me to produce, an episode of their show called Proof. Esquire asked me to write a piece on Chinese restaurants. I mean, so now suddenly I'm the food expert. So there's that's going on, but also my agents are trying to sell it as a TV show. So hopefully, fingers crossed that something does happen from it. But more specifically for myself, there's a couple of things. I am working on a second memoir off of this. Spoiler alert, I don't know if I want to tell people, but I will tell people. So what happened in 2005, you know, I was writing for the Disney Channel at that time as an Asian American writer in Hollywood. It was hard, right? Because there weren't a lot of Asian American shows. I was working on a show called Jake Long, American Dragon or something. It's okay. No, you don't have to clap here. But you know, as an Asian American, we didn't have a lot of opportunities and stuff like that. But then, so sadly, my parents were in a car accident, and my dad passed away. And so my brother, the golden child in the book, Chris, you know, immediately whisks my mom out here to Los Altos Hills, where he lives, you know, and he was going to help my mom recuperate. And by the end of that first week, all my other siblings decided that they were also going to move out to Northern California, which left me behind in Detroit to try to figure out what to do with this 60-year-old restaurant, which was like this wonderful place to grow up. Do I go back to Hollywood where it's kind of like a struggle, you know, as an Asian American writer, or do I stay back in Detroit where there's this wonderful restaurant, this gift? And so that's the book I'm working on. It's called Leftovers. And it's sort of like, it'd be like, in TV terms, it'd be The Bear set in a Chinese restaurant. But then the other thing that I'm really excited about, which I've been telling you about, and if there's anybody here who can help with this, please come up to me. So for my paperback release, there are 24 chapters in the book, so I'm going to do 24 more readings, but every reading is going to be in a Chinese restaurant around the country. And all my conversation partners will be Chinese restaurant owners or staff, so they can tell their story. So I want people to, so they can tell their story. And I'm going to, you know, film this and try to put together an 8-part docuseries on the history of Chinese restaurants in America, because you can really see the journey of our community through the prism of Chinese food and restaurants, right? Whether you're looking at the Chinese Exclusion Act, up to the Hart Cellar when the Taiwanese Americans came in, to the globalization, you know, or the normalization of relations between China and the US. It's just gonna be a lot of fun. And I'm gonna talk to all these other fellow Chinese restaurant kids and hear how they made it thanks to their family's Chinese restaurant. So please come up to me if you either grew up in a Chinese restaurant or you work at a foundation. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give Curtis a great round of applause, please. So now it's when we'll do this hard to engineer selfie. Is that correct? Okay.
So if you guys follow me on Instagram, you know that out of these 200 events I go to, I always take a selfie. So you guys can all be part of one of these, what people are now calling the Curtis Chin selfie. So hopefully we can do this quickly. Okay?
And then we'll open up for audience Q&A.
And then we'll do audience Q&A after that. Okay? So quickly, we're going to try to do this. So. If you have the book in your hand and you try to hold it up. Okay. Now we do Q&A.
All right, I think we have a question up front here. Jeffrey, thank you.
Somewhere in science in your middle, your mom said work hard and be quiet, but it's very verbal, very outspoken. So nowadays, like I could probably be your mom, but I work hard, but I don't speak up. So I've been killed so many times. I'm just starting to speak up at 77. So are your siblings speaking up, or are they quiet?
Do I have the biggest mouth? No. So my mom did have this rule of, you know, work hard, obey your elders, and be quiet. I follow one of them fully. I follow the other one halfway, and the other one I completely ignore. So you have to figure out which is which. Yeah.
How about your siblings?
I think they're mixed, but I'm probably the biggest mouth. But it's also, I don't know. Politically thinking, I've thought about this, is that, you know, I'm also gay, and in the gay community, we have this term called silence equals death. So, you know, I've understood that you do have to speak out about things, you know. And, you know, if you read the book, you know, part of it is my understanding of having a voice. And so, like, you know, after Vincent Chin had been killed, and I'd taken the typewriter out there, and I was writing these letters. One day, Mayor Coleman Young, right, the first black mayor of Detroit, who was a regular customer, he saw me sitting in the back typing these letters, and he's like, "What are you doing back there?" And my dad, who was always like a big mouth, was like, "Oh, he's writing these angry letters." And I'm like, they're not angry, right? Because we're Buddhists, right? We're taught to be like not angry, to like let go of all these emotions. And then Mayor Coleman Young actually said, "It's okay to be angry. Like sometimes you need anger to sort of drive you." And for me, that was an eye-opening moment of like, oh, maybe there is a different way to approach these things. And so that was one of the beauties of growing up there and meeting these customers who gave you these different perspectives. So while my mom did tell me to like be quiet, Mayor Coleman Young said, "No, speak up." And so Mayor Coleman Young won. So. Yeah, no, not me.
Hi, my name is Virginia Chung, and I'm doing a project with the Committee of 100. And McKinsey & Co. recently put out a report that there is interest in more authentic representation of Asians in film and media. So my question, help me do my report here, is what makes a story authentically Asian?
Well, I always bristle even on that term authentic, and I relate that to Chinese food because people are always saying, "Oh, that's not authentic Chinese food," right? Because the type of food that we served was like egg foo young and chow mein and stuff like that. And so for me, I always question, well, if you had this term authentic, you must have a definition of what that means, but who created that term, And what is authentic for one person is not for another person because it doesn't feel real to them. What would be an authentic Asian American experience? I have no idea. I don't think there is one. I don't think you can categorize it. Maybe that's the wrong framing. Writer Viet Thanh Nguyen actually talks about this idea of narrative plentitude, which is probably more important, is that we don't want to just have a singular Asian American story. That's why it's so important to just have many different things. And so for me, I'm writing the gay Asian Detroit story. You know what I mean? Maybe somebody else will write a different component to it, right? Maybe somebody from the South, maybe somebody from Montana, you know what I mean? Maybe a transgender person, you know what I mean? So there are all these different stories that are out there. And then I think that reading a multitude of all these stories, then you get a full picture of the diversity of our community, which I think is probably more important. I don't think we should have police saying this is a true Asian American story, this is not. Because to the people living those stories, it is an authentic experience.
Yeah, looking at Katie, yeah.
Thank you. My name is Bayard Fong. Actually, my dad had a restaurant in Denver, Colorado.
Chinese restaurant kid.
At age 13, I got to be what I called myself head chef number 2. Start with washing the rice, putting in the sweet sour sauce together, wonton soup, and the wonton chips. But my question here is, being like actually 5th generation in America from my family, going back to 1866, and great-grandpa coming in 1905 as cook for a family in Pacific Heights. So there's a lot of cooking involved in our family. But lately, working at the Human Rights Commission for 34 years, and then this Asian hate violence erupts. And I'm retired. I'm supposed to be traveling, enjoying stuff, but I can't. So my question to you is, maybe you could help us. We're trying to get to the root causes of all this Asian hate, so we can solve the root causes. Can you help us point the way of how to find the root causes of Asian hate?
Sure, I'm a poet. I can do this. The one thing that I do point out is that I do believe that the hate and discrimination that my great-great-grandfather faced when he arrived in America in the 1800s is the same, that I face, right? The same stereotypes. And we look at COVID, a lot of things that they said about the Asian community are the same things they said back then, right? Like that we were foreigners, that we were dirty, you know, all these same stereotypes. I think for me, I'd rather focus on the positive changes that have happened since then, and then particularly compared to, say, like the Vincent Chin case, and why those people were able to get away with committing a vicious, heinous crime. You have to look at the positivity, which is, how has our community changed then, right? Back then, as I pointed out, the media didn't cover the story. But now we have Asian Americans all over, right, in the newsroom, keeping, you know, identifying these as important stories. Like you guys have people here, Sifan is in New York, right, but you guys have some Asian American reporters. I know David Louie, you know, but you have a lot of people here. Yeah, you know, who are making sure these stories are covered, right? You have a whole network of Asian American nonprofits, you know, who are encouraging people to report crimes. You have, you know, Asian American politicians, right, who can pass legislation. You have Asian American celebrities who can use social media to keep these stories alive. You have Asian American business people who are supporting nonprofits, you know, to fund this movement. And so I feel like if, God forbid, like a Vincent Chin case were to happen again now, I don't think we would have that same response. So I feel like that's the best response to it. Will we ever completely eradicate racism or homophobia or sexism, you know, or transphobia or any of the anti-Semitism or any of these things? I don't think we'll ever remove these things from society, but we should hopefully get to a point where these things are, presented that the communities will fight back, that we will stand against these things, so that people who have these thoughts, you know that they can't act on it. I feel like that's probably the best that we can, you know, get to. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Curtis. I think we're at time. I want to make sure there's enough time for people to pick up their books and also interact with Curtis, who will be sticking around to sign the book as well. Really, thank you so much for being such a beautiful audience
Thank
today.
you so much, everybody.